All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to this explainer on the UK Maritime and Coast Guard Agency's HSSC framework. Now, if you've ever dealt with maritime compliance, you know it can sometimes feel like an absolute labyrinth of paperwork and never-ending deadlines. But today, we're going to transform what is often seen as a pretty dense regulatory manual into a clear, strategic, operational advantage for your fleet.
Picture this for a second. What if you could eliminate redundant surveyor visits and all those endless administrative headaches? What if you could actually align the schedules of exactly 9 major maritime certificates into one single master timeline? Well, that is exactly the power of the framework we're unpacking today.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going from fragmented to harmonized, breaking down the anatomy of a survey, comparing passenger and cargo ships, looking at timing and flexibility, diving into the master compliance matrices, and finally, looking at the unified impact.
Okay, Section 1. From fragmented to harmonized. This is really a paradigm shift. In the past, maintaining maritime compliance was honestly just chaotic. You had these fragmented schedules, overlapping surveyor visits, certificates expiring at completely different times, and vessels constantly getting held up in port. Fun fact, there are over 50,000 merchant ships trading internationally right now, so organizing this global fleet is no small feat. It's practically like trying to choreograph a ballet with 50,000 massive steel dancers. But the HSSC completely flips the script here. It brings in a standardized system that actually aligns expirations, which unlocks the ability to have concurrent surveyor visits.
By adopting the 1988 SOLAS and load lines protocols, the industry managed to structurally align the schedules for 9 major convention certificates. Pinning the maximum validity to exactly 5 years for most ships, that is absolutely crucial. It slashes vessel downtime, cuts the redundant paperwork, and yeah, it directly drives down your operational costs.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of a Survey, and getting our baseline vocabulary straight.
So what actually is the HSSC? Well, at its core, it's not just some dry set of rules. It is a strategic regulatory framework purpose-built to keep your ships out in service longer. It takes these crazy, reactive compliance cycles and turns them into predictable, highly manageable events.
You can basically group these surveys into 2 distinct buckets. First, you have the scheduled life cycle. That's your predictable loop. The initial entry survey, the annual general check, the intermediate mid-cycle checks, and of course, that big, comprehensive 5-year renewal. Then you've got event-driven checks. These are specific checks outside that standard loop, like inspecting the outside of the ship's bottom, or maybe an extra survey you suddenly need after a major repair.
Section 3 now, passenger versus cargo ships, and building that baseline framework.
As you know, the rules totally shift depending on what kind of vessel you're operating. Passenger ships are on a super strict 1-year certificate validity with full annual renewals. Cargo ships, however, get a much broader 5-year maximum cycle. Even the bottom inspection rules differ. Cargo ships need at least 2 inspections every 5 years, usually out of the water, but passenger ships need that checked annually though. To be fair, in-water inspections are permitted during the off years.
Let's zoom in on passenger ships for a second. Because human lives are directly at stake in such large numbers, the scope is understandably intense. We're talking complete annual inspections of the hull, machinery, and boilers. Safety and navigation systems are rigorously tested. And there's that strict bottom rule we just touched on, mandating at least 2 out-of-water bottom inspections per 5-year window, with a maximum of 36 months between them. No exceptions. Cargo ships, on the other hand, split their compliance focus into 3 main pillars. You've got safety equipment, or HSSC, radio installations, and structure and machinery, known as SAFCON. This covers the whole shebang from fire safety and lifeboats to boilers and steering gear. And naturally, if you're dealing with tankers, there are specific targeted deep dives required for things like pump rooms and cargo ventilation piping.
So for cargo ships running on that 5-year cycle, the depth of the survey progresses really logically. Step 1 is this massive initial survey validating workmanship before it even enters service. Then it scales down to standard annual surveys for general fitness. About midway through, you hit the intermediate or periodical surveys, which dig a bit deeper, especially in those dangerous zones on tankers. And finally, step 4,
It all culminates in a massive, comprehensive renewal survey at year 5 to completely reset the clock.
All right, part 4. Timing, flexibility, and extensions. Basically, managing the real world.
Look, we all know the reality of the maritime industry, right? Ships get delayed. Extreme weather, unexpected port congestion, supply chain issues. It happens. The HSSC gets this, so it builds in some really smart safety valves. If your ship is in perfect position early, you can actually do an early renewal up to 3 months prior to expiry without losing your original date sequence. If you're delayed, certificates can be extended up to 3 months to let you finish a survey. And hey, even if the renewal is totally done, but the physically endorsed certificate hasn't made it aboard yet, you get a 5-month grace period where the existing one remains valid.
To keep all of this organized over 5 years, the whole system revolves around what's called the anniversary date, which is simply the day and month your certificate expires. This creates a highly specific operational window. It dictates that your mandatory annual or intermediate surveys absolutely have to be completed within a strict plus or minus 3-month window around that anniversary date. Basically, it gives you a 6-month target to hit every single year.
Section 5. The Master Compliance Matrices. Let's put all the pieces together.
Okay, before we dive into the full matrix, let me give you a quick mental shortcut to save you some cognitive overload. Just keep this rule of thumb in your back pocket. Load line rules rely strictly on annual surveys, but the environmental codes, like MARPOL, offer a flexible intermediate option in years 2 or 3.
So, mapping this theory onto reality for core safety. Passenger ships run purely on R, renewals every single year. But if we look at the cargo safety equipment and safety construction requirements, you'll see them using that strategic mix of A for annuals and either P for periodical or I for intermediate surveys, specifically timed for years 2 and 3. And it's a very similar story for environmental and specialized cargo. Think gas carriers and chemical ships. Notice how that flexible intermediate survey, the II, pops up across almost all of those codes in years 2 or 3. And just like our mental shortcut promised, it perfectly contrasts with the load line rules, which demand strictly annual checks straight through to year 5. Which brings us to our final section, number 6. The unified impact on efficiency and safety. Now, the true payoff of this entire system is consolidation. By merging those fragmented safety equipment, radio, and construction certificates into one single unified cargo ship safety certificate, or the HSSC, you directly enable concurrent surveyor visits. So instead of 3 separate visits, you just have 1. This massive reduction in administrative headaches means fewer port delays, and it keeps your ships out at sea maximizing uptime, all without dropping the ball on safety standards.
So, as you evaluate your own fleet's schedules and operational procedures, you really have to ask yourself a hard question. Are you merely checking the required boxes just to stay compliant and avoid a penalty? Or are you actually fully leveraging the HSSC's flexibility and single certificate options to run a truly harmonized, highly efficient fleet? Shifting from a fragmented approach to a master, harmonized matrix doesn't just save you money, it builds a far more robust safety culture. Thank you so much for tuning into this explainer on the HSSC framework with me. Mastering these schedules directly contributes to safer lives, safer ships, and cleaner seas. So take a close look at your own compliance matrices today. Where are your hidden inefficiencies, and exactly how many extra days at sea could true harmonization unlock for your fleet?